Please let me be your husband. It was a Friday morning when my wife told me that she was going out that night after work and probably wouldn't be back until the next day. She had prepared her speech meticulously and delivered it in a rapid yet composed manner, which immediately convinced me that there was nothing I could do to change her mind. There was nothing I could do to change her mind. She told me she still loved me, but her gaze had developed a distant, wandering look. This was my first experience of marital infidelity. I had only ever seen it in movies, books, plays, and even in the gossip shared by victims and perpetrators in their real-life tales. As I stood there, I listened to her carefully rehearsed speech. She said I was strong enough to handle it and that it was unfair that she didn't have time to explore life fully before our marriage. She argued that human beings are not naturally monogamous, and that society's rules about love are too rigid. She said it's just love. She said that she would be much more attentive to my needs in the future if I allowed her this freedom. Each sigh seemed to fuel her momentum as she ventured further into the well-trodden waters of clichés. She said that I had no choice and that she could do whatever she wanted with her body. She said that life is short and that she deserves to enjoy herself. She also said that she has the right to explore different experiences. She didn't consider things like brain size or financial stability. She was purely aiming for physical experiences. Let me clarify. I am not suggesting that I am poorly endowed. I would not describe myself as physically weak or lacking in character. I'm not saying I'm unintelligent or lacking in character, but I am a rocket scientist and my career has made me quite wealthy. My wife has never complained about our life. When the former love of my life finished her statement, I felt a surge of anger. I could have reacted with brute force, like a savage beast, overwhelmed by the fury within me. I could have assumed the role of Ahab, a vengeful king with a superiority complex, obsessed with defeating the great beast. But we all know that Ahab's story ended in destruction. Melville offered a better model for me. I've often thought about emulating the message of his story, even though it's not always clear, but the meaning of its strange central character suddenly became apparent when my wife asked me to kiss her goodbye. I was really grateful to Herman Melville for the lesson. I'd rather not go through that again. We've all experienced jaw-dropping moments. There are moments in life when everything seems so surreal that you're left speechless. You're so stunned that you feel the need to say something, but your brain struggles to process what you've just witnessed, leaving you without the words to express your thoughts. My wife's jaw dropped, her mouth grotesquely wide open in shock. Her reaction was almost theatrical, a blend of disbelief and horror that seemed to stretch time itself. I felt like I really wanted to have a long chat with her about morals, oaths, and the importance of keeping our marriage vows. I wanted to show her how much I love her, and maybe even threaten her with the consequences of her actions. All these emotions were building up inside me like a volcano about to erupt, but somehow I managed to keep my cool and simply said I'd rather not do that often. People have a lot of power and influence that is often underestimated and rarely considered a strength. The gift of self-control is a powerful thing. I found that maintaining control gave me strength in that moment. My simple refusal was my way of exerting control over the situation and a quiet assertion of my will. This led to a new topic from her. She ranted about how I didn't respect her needs and accused me of harboring immature resentment. She kept going, saying things like, "You're going to have to accept my decision or do without me." I stayed calm and said I'd rather not. I could see her confidence starting to slip a bit. She was trying to look strong, but I could tell she was feeling uncertain. I could see her starting to hesitate. I didn't threaten, beg, cry, or explode with Eind. My calm resistance seemed to disarm her. So she tried a different approach, negotiation. She promised she wouldn't stay out all night on her first date, assuring me she would come home and reaffirm her deep love for me. My response was unchanged. My resolve was unbroken. I'd rather not do that. This stunning phrase was like an encore to our confrontation, each repetition reinforcing its power. My wife shifted from a soft-spoken mistress to the lawyer she had once aspired to be. She had struggled with the bar exam as much as I had struggled with this situation, and now she tried to wield her legal knowledge was against me. I was pretty sure she didn't remember one of her law school classes the year before we got married. The entire class had drafted prenuptial agreements for personal use. She had taken it very seriously at the time, and the contract was duly signed, notarized, and fully enforceable. She also said that if I wanted a divorce, she would take my house, my bank account, and even my trust fund. She said that I would end up in my house in my bed, sleeping with whoever she wanted, whenever she wanted. She said that I would pay for it. My response was simple and resolute. I'd rather not. She didn't come back that night, so I could reclaim her. She didn't come home on Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. She finally got back on Sunday night, looking like a wild animal that had just been driven onto the rocks. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes rumpled, and there was a wild, almost desperate look in her eyes. She dumped her bag on the patio next to mine. I went to the grill to cook a ribeye steak, which was sizzling nicely. The aroma of the steak mingled with the tension in the air, but I didn't even bother to look in her direction. My silence spoke volumes. I figured you'd rather not kiss me. I continued with my task, smearing marinade on the sizzling meat and turning. I turned the corn a quarter of a turn, focusing on the familiar routine to take my mind off the tension between us. "Would you mind cooking one of those for me?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with a hint of desperation. "I'd rather not," I replied, not looking up from the grill. "That's right. I should have known. Are you ever going to say anything? Otherwise, I'd rather not." "That gets tiresome very quickly," she snapped, her tone showing frustration. I turned to her, ready to respond, but she cut me off. "No, don't even talk about it. I'm tired. It's better if you don't do it. That's the punishment. It's going to be a long night because we have to talk about it, and you're going to have to say something." "Nothing, is that really the end of it? You're going to file for divorce?" I could see the pain in her eyes. We'd been dating for 2 years in college, 3 years while I was in law school, and 2 years after that, 5 years of marriage and 7 years together, and you give that up in 2 weekends while I researched. I also needed to understand the differences. It's been eating away at me for years. I thought it was all settled when I married you. I love you and will love you forever. But I couldn't be around another guy without wondering how good he was in bed, and questioning how it felt to be cherished instead of fixed. I wanted to be the girl on the cover of a love story with a rough cowboy who does whatever he wants to her, or the lord of the manor exercising his rights over me, a humble peasant girl. I'm sorry, but I couldn't help myself. You're a wonderful husband and a wonderful lover, but I should have tried other men. Oh, baby, I'm so sorry, please don't. Just stand there in silence. Say something." I put the steak and corn on a toasted bun, added another grilled peach on top, and finally turned to look at my wife for the first time since she returned. "I prefer not to do that." "No, don't do that. Don't be so cold to me, yell at me, threaten me, hit me. Just don't ignore me. I know I was wrong and I'm sorry. I was wrong and I'm sorry. I'll do anything for you. Just take me back." "I'd rather not." Things got heated after that, so I didn't. I didn't grill her a steak, although I did think about charring something for her in the days that followed. She tried to talk, but every request she made was met with a quietly polite response. I'd rather she asked me what I would have preferred to do instead, and I just shrugged. I didn't leave the room if she tried to talk to me. I didn't ask her what had happened. You could tell she was desperate to gain my favor. The following Friday, she came home a little late, talking a mile a minute about a happy hour with her CO workers. She was drinking and laughing with her colleagues. Then she noticed there was nothing on the table and I was getting ready to leave the house. "What's going on? Are we going somewhere? Oh, you're not taking me with you? Is this my punishment? Are you going back to my place?" Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and hope. I shook my head and said, I gave her the standard answer, "I'd rather not," and left. I went out to dinner with my parents who were in town for the weekend. I put them up at the Hilton by the river because I didn't want to involve them in our drama at home. They already knew all about it, and were happy to have a wonderful evening with dinner on a river cruise. I got home at 10, just to let you know it's 30 p.m. I still looked like $1,000,000 when I got home, but my wife was crying. I went to bed without saying anything. I don't know what was going on in her head, but the next morning I woke up to the smell of breakfast she'd made. My wife didn't ask me anything before she spoke. "Last night was awful. You left without me and I was left home alone. I couldn't get rid of the thought of you being in town with another woman. I feel awful now, and I realize how you must have felt when I was gone. Over the weekend, I'll ask you a question. Will you answer me honestly? Were you with another woman? I've dated both my parents. My mom is definitely a woman I dated." She answered honestly, yes. Her face reflected mixed emotions. She now knew that I had dated another woman last night. It filled her mind with anxiety. On the other hand, I had said something else. It was a good sign. Morning routine and golf outing. I began my day with a simple breakfast. I savored the quiet moment. Once I'd finished, I went to the garage to get my golf clubs, knowing I was in for a peaceful morning on the greens. My father, despite being in his 42nds, still had the energy and skill of his younger days. His swing was as powerful and precise as ever, reminiscent of his time coaching the Special Olympics and serving as the state team director. We chatted about all sorts of things, but we both avoided the subject of my marriage. I got back just in time to shower and change into my tuxedo. I was heading out for an important evening. As I went downstairs, my wife stopped me. She was surprised and hurt to see me in such formal clothes. I just smiled and said, "Honey, no one compares to you when you dress like that." She said that all of our anniversary dinners have been unforgettable. She tried to stay calm, but it was clear she was upset. She asked who I thought she was, and I said I didn't want to know. I replied gently, trying to keep the conversation from getting bad. She said she'd been thinking over the weekend and realized she'd made a mistake. She said she'd been wrong to leave me and then spend the weekend humiliating me. She said she should never have done that. I've done that. Let me tell you about my weekend. Taking a deep breath, she began her story on Friday. My date took me to Wendy's for a burger before a concert. He said we had great seats, so I dressed up nicely. You saw me. I looked good, but when we got there, our seats were so far from the stage that I couldn't see the singers even with binoculars. He made me buy a beer, even though I was driving. It was my car, my gas. Then I bought dinner. My first date in ages ended up with the cheapest jerk. On the way home, he started groping me when we got to a red light in our neighborhood. I jumped out of the car and went to McGuire's Lounge, where a blues band was playing. The guy tried to follow me, but Eric, the bouncer, stopped him. She paused, her face reflecting the pain of her experiences. I told Eric the guy was a creep and was following me. Can you believe that? I promised him nothing inside the lounge. I saw a guy I knew from work. We hung out, but he got so drunk I had to. When we arrived at his place, I drove him home. He passed out, leaving me to sleep on his couch. I woke up to him crawling all over me, promising to make it up to me. I told him off, questioning how he could ever make it up to me with his pathetic attempt. She sighed deeply, her eyes searching mine for understanding. Instead of appreciating what I had at home, I decided to reassert my femininity and sexuality. I went to another bar, ready to hook up with some guy. His wife barged in, furious and red. I was ready to throw her off, so I slapped him and yelled, "So you're married?" Ironically, I didn't even take off my rings. She laughed bitterly, and then I went to the Clam Shack bar on the beach. A man approached me, flirting sweetly and making conversation. He seemed genuine, looking me in the eye instead of ogling my body. I was so taken in by his charm that I didn't notice two little kids running up shouting, "Grandpa, Grandpa, there you are!" He disappeared quickly. She shook her head, and her voice grew softer. I ended up getting a room in an old motel behind the Clam Shack, bought a bottle of wine and went out on the balcony for some quiet time. Below me, a group of single and divorced women were talking about their dating failures. They shared stories about misogynistic older leers and cheap men. The group of single and divorced women were discussing their dating experiences. They shared stories about negative encounters with men, including misogynistic behavior, leering, and men who were not interested in a committed relationship. They also talked about dating men from different cultures, races, and religions, and how physical appearance was not as important as a caring partner. The women agreed that if you find a man who is both caring and if he's devoted, you should hold on to him forever. I could have left to come home to you, but I stayed and listened to their conversation. I spent the rest of the night thinking about you. I woke up on the balcony feeling the sun burn my skin. I felt guilty and stiff from sleeping on a sofa. The food and wine were pretty cheap, and I was pretty drunk, so my stomach was upset. I had arranged for a late checkout, took a shower, got dressed, and came home. I was really sorry. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Honey, that night I walked out of our house with a firm intention of cheating on you, but I didn't. I was on your side, sweetheart. It was clear that I was meant to be with you. Please forgive me. Please let me still be your wife. Let's forget what happened and go back to our happy life." I felt sorry for her, but not in love, as I looked into her tear-filled eyes. I gave her my answer. I didn't tell her about the other woman I was dating, who was actually my mother. I didn't tell her if I believed her sad story about how her dreams crumbled that weekend. I told her I love her, but I wasn't sure. I didn't say anything else. She didn't give up on me trying to get back into my heart. I avoided her by when I was traveling for work or staying out late. I just nodded or shook my head when she asked me questions. I slept in a different room and ate at different times. Eventually, she got tired of the struggle. We never divorced, but she moved somewhere else. I think I'll put an end to it someday, but for now, I'd rather not.